All right, Colts Nation, well, here we are headed into week 4, and despite really a tumultuous start for the season for this team, ultimately going into this week, the Colts have a chance to come out of it at 2-2 and be back at 500. Like the start of the season never happened, right? In theory, being 2-2 is the same thing as being 0-0, which is before you ever played a game. The only difference, of course, is that there's less football to be played in front of you. And as it currently stands at home at Lucas Oil, they stand as a 2.5-point underdog against the 3-0 Steelers. That was a 1.5-point underdog for much of the week until maybe just today. I don't know. This was the first time I saw it at 2.5. I made sure to check it before I came to the camera and spoke to you. Now, historically, the Indianapolis Colts, at least in the past decade or so, have next to no success at all against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Only one win since the year 2011. Now, that was last year, which I suppose is somewhat of a positive sign against Mitch Trubisky-led Steelers, right? Take that as you may. Other than that, I don't know how long of a streak it was. Someone feel free to look it up. 7, 8, 9 games. I mean, we had versed the Steelers quite a few times since 2011, and it was nothing but doom and gloom. Now, with all of that said, even at 3-0, I don't exactly buy what it is that the Steelers are selling, at least on the offensive side of the football. That's going to be a well-coached team for sure. There's no question about the fact that Mike Tomlin, right? You got to trust the product that he's going to put out on the field to be a tough day out, right? You're not going to go out there and have a cakewalk against the Steelers, right? I don't know. Is he here at 18, 19, 20? I don't know how long he's been coaching that team. One of those numbers. Never had a losing season. Now, again, that's impressive in 7 seasons. So whether it's 18, 19, or 20 years, ultimately doesn't really matter, right? Mike Tomlin, one of the premier coaches in the NFL, so you can count on the fact that the Bears are going to come out and play good football. But offensively, it's just not a team right now, even with the Colts defense. They just don't strike fear into me on the offensive side of the ball. They're not really all that explosive, right? They just play good enough to win with the defense performing as it is. And boy, is that defense performing. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But you look right now and you say, okay, against the Falcons in week 1, they put up 18. They were able to win with 18 points. The Broncos, they were able to win while scoring 13. The Chargers, they just barely got a 2 in front. They were able to win scoring 20 points. So nothing particularly alarming there for the Indianapolis Colts defense on the offensive side of the ball. But at the same time, you look at the injury report and you say, okay, as I record this episode, we already know that there's going to be no Kwity Paye and Kenny Moore. That's obviously a big deal. Chris Lamons, who presumably would be the backup in the slot for Kenny Moore on some level. We know Julian Blackman could come down and play in the nickel as well. But Chris Lamons would be another option and a useful piece for the Colts in the absence of Kenny Moore. He has not been practicing for the past couple of days, right? With a knee, ankle, whatever it might be. Ryan Kelly, also neck injury. He hasn't been practicing. It looks like Braden Smith got in a full practice with that knee. He's going to play, presumably, as at least evidenced by that, right? Tyquan Lewis limited. We're going to need him out there. So the Colts have some injuries on the defensive side of the ball, and that to some degree, despite the fact that I don't trust the Steelers' offense much at all, does add some question marks to the Colts' defense. With that said, a lot of key players still there, right? You got the linebackers. You got Jalen Jones, reigning AFC Player of the Week on the defensive side of the ball. That's pretty impressive stuff. Grover Stewart, I think I saw that he was the number 1 rated run defender right now at defensive tackle. That's why we paid him. That's why we have him. That's, of course, as per PFF. Take that as you may. Sometimes I like stats. Sometimes I don't. But sometimes you got to go off of something, right? I mean, you got to have some benchmark somewhere. So we know Grover Stewart's out there. Raekwon Davis, I thought, made his presence felt last week. We see if that continues. Really, the question for the Indianapolis Colts right now is simple in this Steelers game. Which defense is going to show up, right? With all of those injuries, we don't know which way that's going to go. But the question is, how is this team going to look on the defensive side of the ball? Obviously, the run game is the question. But ultimately, this game is going to come down to one thing for the Indianapolis Colts, assuming the run defense isn't atrocious, right? Because you look at it. Hold on, I have a stat for you right now. Indianapolis Colts, in the first 3 halves of football this year, allowed an average of 149 rushing yards per half. The last 3 halves they've played, only 30 rushing yards per half, right? So it's kind of, you played 6 halves of football, and it's kind of a tale of right? 3-3. Good run defense, bad run defense. The good run defense has been more current, right? This is why I don't do stats. I'm like fucking confusing the shit out of myself with all this stuff. Are the Colts going to be able to stop the run? If they could even do it at a moderate level, my point is that this game comes down to something other than that. We're going to talk about what that is. We're going to talk about keys to victory for the Indianapolis Colts. Offensively, I think it is more of a game plan or a philosophy that they have to come into the game with, right? And on the defensive side of the ball with the injuries, I think it much more becomes about the matchups than it does about a game plan or a philosophy. Of course, you have to game plan well, but I'm saying if you had to weigh one over all else, that's my point, okay? We're going to talk about what those are. We're going to do a score prediction at the end of the episode and then do a parlay so we could make or lose some money going into this one. And that's pretty much it, right? Without further ado, let's get into it. But before we do, you know what it is. I got to introduce myself. For those of you who haven't been here, my name is Justin. This is the Ride on the Bench Colts podcast. As always, I ask anyone enjoying the YouTube video, go ahead and shoot it a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, audio listeners, leave a 5-star review. Let the people know how much you like the show. Subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers over here at some point during the season. We're kind of close. We're kind of not close. Listen, here's the bottom line. If you enjoy the content, you keep coming back and you've yet to subscribe, perhaps today's the day. But most importantly, the goal here is really, one, to create a more educated Colts fan base, and two, to make being a Colts fan, particularly in these tough times, a little more enjoyable. And that's what we're here to do. And we're going to start by talking about the offensive side of the ball a little bit against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this right here is the story of the game. Right now, you have the Colts, who by many measures, some people would consider to be the best offensive line in all of football, right? But the Steelers doing a spectacular job against the run. One of the top 3 run defenses in the NFL. Overall, one of the best defenses in the NFL, right? So in the running game, you're talking about an unstoppable force in the Indianapolis Colts and what they're able to do when they want to, meeting an immovable object in that of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the steel curtain, right? That's very much a part of their identity, always has been. Now, that matchup right there in the trenches and in the running game, in my opinion, is what is going to decide this game overall. I think everything else will just happen. I think that ultimately you'll be able to look at that and just based off of the numbers right there, without knowing the score, I think you're going to be able to predict the result of this football game if you don't know the score, right? Does that make sense? If you look at those numbers and don't look at anything else, you'll know the winner based off of that. So, with that being said, there's some other things to take into account right here. Right now, the Steelers are +4 turnover differential. That's pretty good. That's how you become a 3-0 football team, right? The Colts, on the other hand, -2, right? They're on the red side of things on the turnover differential. That's -2, meaning, for those of you who don't know what turnover differential is, simple. If you're at 0, it means you've taken the ball away from the other team as much as they've taken it away from you. If you're on the plus side of things, it means you're doing a good job. Minus side, you're doing a bad job, right? The Colts at -2, it's not good, but that's not terrible, right? With that being said, you have the Steelers are doing a good job right now of forcing quarterbacks to make mistakes. Our young quarterback in Anthony Richardson is making some mistakes, or at least missing some throws at minimum, right? So logic would dictate that coming into this game, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, if you're Shane Steichen, if you're Jim Bob Cooter, etc., right, the whole offensive staff, you got to come out and lean on this running game. And that's really the MO for the Colts overall, right? Got to get the ball to JT. Got to get Trey Sermon involved. If it means you're running the ball 30-some-odd times and you don't want JT on the field for the entirety of the game, get Trey Sermon in there as well. Just make sure when it's money time and it's 3rd and 1, you're not running a speed option, right, to Trey Sermon. Make sure that the money downs, you have JT out there. But Trey Sermon is plenty good enough to make sure that he comes out there and gives you positive momentum in the running game when JT needs a breather. And even Anthony Richardson himself, right? You have those 3 guys in the best offensive line in football and a team that's getting a lot of interceptions and a quarterback that's throwing a lot of interceptions. All of those things combined would lead you to believe that the Colts are going to come out here ready to run the football. And the question is, even though the Steelers are playing good against the run, are they good enough to stop the Colts running game if they come in with the mentality that they're going to run it down their throat and they commit to the run? For the Colts' sake, they better hope the Steelers can't stop that, because if they are, it's going to be a long day for the Indianapolis Colts. Plain and simple. Just is what it is. One minor note on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of talk about Michael Pittman Jr. and how he has not been able to get involved in the passing game, right? Curious to see how he does in this game. It's the first game of the season, right, where he's not versing one of the elite corners in the game. Now, Joey Porter is a good corner, right? We like Joey. I don't like Joey Porter. I don't like anyone on the Steelers. We're versing him. But my point is that that's a good corner, but he's not Derek Stingley, okay? He's not Jalen Johnson. He's not Jair Alexander. So Michael Pittman Jr., right, not only versing those elite corners in the first 3 weeks, but also other teams know the Colts have a young quarterback. They're game planning to take Michael Pittman out of the junior out of the game. I was about to say take Michael Pittman out of the junior. They're game planning to take Michael Pittman Jr. out of the game, plus they have their best corner on him, and they're saying Anthony goes somewhere else. He's had a tough time with that, right? That's what we're seeing to some degree amongst many other things. This is the first game I look at the personnel on Pittsburgh's side of the ball on defense, and I'm saying, hey, this is really maybe the first chance to get Michael Pittman some volume in the passing game. That'll be big if we could get that done and we could get that rhythm going. I think Michael Pittman Jr., if you're able to feed him in the passing game, I think maybe the passing game could start to come together a little bit. But ultimately, Anthony Richardson going to have to play clean as well, which has been a struggle up to this point. That's kind of the offensive breakdown for the Indianapolis Colts and kind of what I'm looking at overall. Now, defensively, obviously, we have to stop the run. We're going to keep saying that till we get over the PTSD of what we saw to start this season. But with that said, the Steelers don't do it all that well. And as I said, the Colts in the past 3 halves of football doing a real good job against the run. Right now, the Steelers in the running game, if you want me to pull up the stats, if you care, we could go there. Hold on. I have it somewhere. Bing, 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 bing. I feel like I just took the steam out of the episode by doing that, but it's all right. So the Steelers averaging, that's tough because you got Justin Fields involved too, right? Okay, so they're running the ball all right, about the same as the Colts. But in terms of yards per carry for the running backs, right, if we're just talking about the players right there, we're talking about the Joes, right? The pros, the Joes. I don't know what the heck I'm saying. Point being, Najee Harris, very inefficient runner. Cordell Patterson, old as dirt. Still dangerous, but old as dirt. Jaylen Warren hasn't been able to get it done this year. So you look at the Colts run defense, and if you assume that they could just keep the Pittsburgh Steelers running game moderate, right? Now we're talking about the matchups because we spoke about the injuries in the secondary, particularly Kenny Moore. Without Kenny Moore, what exactly do the Colts plan to do, right? You got Jalen Jones and Dallas Flowers. They're going to have to hold their own on the outside. I don't think either of them are going to follow George Pickens, but obviously George Pickens is their guy at the receiver position. They're going to have to hold their own. Jalen Jones, again, reigning AFC Player of the Week on defense. He's going to have to keep that up, right? Keep that momentum even to some degree. Come out there, play with a little bit of attitude, get physical with George Pickens. I don't think George Pickens wants to smoke, to be 100% honest with you. He doesn't strike me as that type of football player. But then again, he'd kick my ass, so what the hell do I know, right? The one guy I look at on the Steelers, we talk about Kenny Moore. They have this kid Calvin Austin in the slot, right? And he's an impressive player. That's an underrated player for this Pittsburgh offense. I'm curious to see how they try to match up against him because he's the guy that can make or break this game, right? At least for the Colts on the defensive side of the football. If we remember that blown lead against the Vikings a couple years back in the Matt Ryan year, one of the things we learned in that game was how good Julian Blackmon could be when he comes down and plays in the slot, right? So that's one way the Colts could handle this in a personnel perspective. You could say, okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to take him and really kind of make him a nickel corner for much of the day and then rely on Rodney McLeod, rely on Rodney Thomas to play that high safety and let Nick Cross continue doing what he's doing. That's one way to do it, particularly if Lamons doesn't play. If Lamons does play, presumably you kind of see a rotation of them doing both things with Julian Blackmon coming down in the nickel and then Lamons also playing the nickel and Julian Blackmon playing up high at that high safety spot. I don't know. We're going to have to see. I'm curious. My point being is that I'm bringing that to your attention because it's something to watch. It's an important matchup for us to pay attention to during this game. The Steelers have a gentleman by the name of Dan Moore Jr. at left tackle. In 2023, that was the worst rated pass blocking tackle in all of football. With that said, this year, PFF has him ranked as a top 10 left tackle in the game of football up to this point in the season. Well, okay. The question is which guy shows up. I think Dan Moore versus Latu is a matchup for us. Is going to be very interesting to watch as fans throughout the course of this game. I think Latu, if he plays his best, should be able to get the better of this guy quite a few times during this game. We're going to see how that goes. Gus Bradley, as always, we got to talk about, right? Very simple. He's got to mix it up. I said the same thing last week. I said the same thing. I said the same thing going in against the Packers. Justin Fields, I'm not convinced. I didn't like him out of college. He did nothing in Chicago to prove me wrong. And now all of a sudden he's 3-0 playing average, maybe slightly above average football. I'm not changing my tune now. I don't think he's that guy, right? It just is what it is. If Gus Bradley mixes it up, right, and forces Justin Fields to actually figure out what the Colts are running, I think he's going to make a mistake. I think it becomes when he makes that mistake, not if he makes that mistake. And ultimately, if you're the Colts defense, you have to capitalize on that thing. The D-line's going to have to get it done in this game, make things difficult on Justin Fields. And in that case, that 2.5-point spread, I kind of think, is on the money as we get into the score prediction. I'm not going to pick a winner, but what I see in this game is like a 20-17 game in either direction. Either Colts win 20-17 or they lose 20-17. That's kind of how I'm viewing this one right now. And I'm not going to pick a winner on that because why would I? That's a 50-50 shot anyway. What the hell's the point, right? Now we're going to go into the parlay for the week. Obviously, spend your money wisely. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I lose money on my parlays every week, but for fun, we're going to talk about it. Okay, we're going to go Pat Freiermuth. Listen closely. This is a same-game parlay. We're going alternate receptions, right? This is on FanDuel Sportsbook. I constantly plug them, even though they don't pay me. Whatever. Pat Freiermuth, 3+ receptions. I feel good about that. The Colts always allow tight ends to catch 1 million passes against them. It just is what it is. Josh Downs, 3+ receptions. Michael Pittman Jr., 3+ receptions. Jonathan Taylor, 50+ yards on the ground and a touchdown. That is plus 509. I'm trying to turn $5 into $30 with that one, okay? That's your parlay. I repeat, 3 receptions for Pat Freiermuth, 3 receptions for Josh Downs, 3 receptions for Michael Pittman Jr., and Jonathan Taylor to get 50 rushing yards and a touchdown. That right there is the parlay of the week. That's what we got, and that's kind of the game preview. How are you feeling about the game? Let me know. What are you looking at? Some of the matchups I mentioned. Is there anything I missed? Is there something that you're looking at that maybe I didn't think of? Entirely possible. And that's it. That's the episode. My name is Justin. This right here was the Ride to the Bench Colts podcast, and as always, boom, go Colts.